We're going to review the setup instructions for the Bridgeport 412 CNC Machining Center. To start with initially, we need to turn the air pressure on so that the tool changer and the lubrication systems will work in the machine. To do that, we engage pressure on the brass fitting, note the pressure on the gauge, and then turn the main power switch to the on position. You will notice when you do that the motors begin running and the cooling fans and the controls start. At this point, we move around to the front of the machine to begin the setup process. As the machine tool is initializing, it runs a diagnostics test. You will notice when it's completed the diagnostics that it gives you the power interrupted message on the CRT. Notice also that every one of the red lights on the front of the control have turned on. At this point, we want to press the clear entry button, and we notice that we've got a relay missing. What this is telling me is that the emergency stop button is off. When I turn that back on, I get a change on the screen. This screen display with the bright highlight strip over each of the axis reference marks indicates that the machine is sitting currently on the reference X, Y, and Z factory preset positions. To initialize the machine, I press the orange button. That turns the power on for the control of the slides, and then pressing cycle start. As I do that, I get slide movement. Notice that the turns off. As soon as the machine moves each one of the axes so it is no longer on the switch, it will turn off. And then I start at the cycle start again. It passes over each one of the reference position switches. And at this point, the machine is ready to qualify axis positions and set up tooling. Okay, with the machine powered up, if you look inside, you will notice that typically there will not be a tool in the spindle when you initially turn it on. What we try to do is leave the spindle empty so that we don't have the corrosion problem between the holder and the spindle, which would compromise the accuracy of the machine tool. To get the tool in the spindle so that we can load an edge finder and set the X and Y axis positions, we make sure we select the manual operating mode, which has the hand designation. I press the stop button. It asks me on the controller for which auxiliary function or M code do I want. I want to enter 6. When I get block complete, I can cycle start, and the machine will begin executing a tool change. At this point in the tool change process, I need to press this black button, and that indexes the carousel around to the cutting tool that I want. In this case, I want the Jacobs chuck because I can install an edge finder in that tool for the purpose of finding my axis positions. Notice that the green cycle start button is blinking. Please do not touch any other buttons on the machine control until you depress cycle start a second time, and it loads the tool in the spindle and completes the tool change. At this point, you can change to whatever mode you want to and move the axis around so we can find axis positions. Okay. Now that the Jacobs chuck is loaded into the spindle on the machine, we're going to load the edge finder in the Jacobs chuck so we can accurately locate a position or establishing X0 and Y0. With the edge finder and the spindle, the next step is to turn the spindle on. This controller is different than the other two milling controllers in that the procedure for establishing the spindle speed is different. We make sure we're in the hand mode, which is for manual operation. We press the tool call button, and the control prompts us on the CRT asking for an S value. I'm going to key in 750, enter, and with that in order for the control to read it and have it active in the machine, I need to press cycle start. Notice that the value of the spindle speed appears at the lower end of the screen. With this value here, you notice this is slightly off. If I adjust this rheostat here just a little bit for spindle speed, I can actually get it to come right in on 750 like we programmed. It was slightly on the plus side. To turn the spindle on, again with the hand mode going, I press stop, 03 for spindle, so it's M03 for spindle on clockwise, and cycle start. Now notice that the spindle is running. Now I'm going to tap the edge finder just to make sure that it's running out a little bit, and then we'll come down and we're going to establish our X0, Y0 at this position on this corner of the workpiece. To do that, I need to move my X-axis. So I change to the handle mode. If I press X, that's going to allow me to move the table with reference to the spindle using either the hand wheel or the rapid jog buttons. If I press this black negative button, that moves the table in a negative direction and moves it at a fairly high rate. Next I'm going to press the Y button. Again, I'm going to come down to Y. And Z. Now I have to be very careful as I'm doing this and make sure I don't run the edge finder into the top of the workpiece. I can control what they call the interpolation factor, which is the speed at which the slides are going to move with the hand wheel by the number that's in here. If I have a value of 2, then as I turn the hand wheel for a particular axis, the rate of movement on the machine table is going to be fairly high. We're going to move down in Z. The edge finder is slightly below the surface of the part.
Okay.
Select the X-axis and reduce my interpolation factor. I'm going to change it to an interpolation factor of 6. So I now have a value of 6 in there. Now I'm moving in the X-axis and I want to move the cutter in a positive direction towards the edge of the workpiece. So I dial the hand wheel and see that it's getting closer. And notice as it begins to contact, there's the appearance of the edge finder bouncing on the edge of the part. I go until that bounce disappears and it is running perfectly up and down. Some people like to do the edge finder right up to the point that it just kicks off center. Difference between running perfectly up and down and just kicking off center is approximately 3/10,000ths of an inch. For our demonstration purposes, that looks like it's pretty close. Now on the control unit, I move from the hand wheel mode to the hand mode, which is a manual mode. And I want to set my axis position. I press X, and I want my datum point at this point to be X. If X0 is the center of the part, I'm on the negative side, and I expect my value to be negative 0.100. So I have a negative 0.100 up here. I press enter, and it updates my axis position. Now, as you notice, and you may wonder about the way the numbers are jumping around here on the screen, and what that has to do is the resolution of the resolvers that drive and position the axis of the machine. It's only moving approximately 0.2 of an inch or 0.2 of an inch, which is relatively small movement and basically insignificant for the setup purposes. My next step again is to go to the hand wheel mode. I'm going to choose Z-axis, and I want to move up in Z to clear the part.
I can't see that you're on the plus. So you're on the plus.
I'm on the plus, and I move up in Z so it clears the part. Now, I want the edge finder to run out again. I don't want it running perfectly true because I'm going to bring it in and touch the Y-axis. So I simply tap it, and it makes it run out. Now I go to my Y-axis position. I want to change my interpolation factor to 3 so that I speed up the process. If I go Y minus, I notice that I'm getting my part, my edge finder down. I'm going to go to the X position and jog it plus. And Z, we're going to come down. And we must be very careful that we do not hit the top of the vise and destroy the edge finder. I come in a positive direction. I pay particular attention to the relationship between the edge finder and the edge of the workpiece. I notice I need to come down just a little bit and see so that it will contact the workpiece and not go slightly over the top. Now I've reduced the interpolation factor for this purpose down to 5. So I have a little more control over the way it moves. We're moving the Y-axis now. We're going to come towards the workpiece, and as we begin to touch, we notice that the edge finder will start going closer and closer to true. And now that we have it running basically true up and down, that's as far as my old eyes can see. I come to the control again. I select the manual mode, represented by the picture of the hand. I press the Y-axis. It says datum set, Y equals, and my edge finder is sitting negative 100 thousandths to the negative side of where Y0 is going to be. So I'm going to set the value at minus 0.100 and enter. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go to my Z-axis. And I just changed to the hand wheel mode, and we're going to move the Z-axis. We'll jog up to clear the part. To verify that the position is correctly set, we can manually jog our axes by moving them to X0, Y0. And so we'll dial it over, and I'm just looking at the CRT, watch the values. X0, we're going to go to Y0, 0. And as I observe, if I bring my spindle down using the hand wheel mode again, we notice that the edge of the edge finder and the center of the edge finder is directly over the corner of the part. And that's what we were trying to do with touching off and establishing the axis origin. At this point, the next step in the process would be to qualify the tool lengths and establishing the Z-axis, Z0 position for the workpiece. To do that, I select manual mode. Notice I did not have to stop the spindle. I select the stop button up here. I put in 6, so it's going to give me an M06, the tool change command. And when I press cycle start, it's going to initiate a tool change. I have now loaded tool number 1 in the spindle, and we will bring it down and touch the top of the part and establish Z0 for this workpiece. To do that, I go back to my handle mode or hand wheel mode. I'm going to jog my X-axis positive to get it over into the middle of the part. Jog my Y-axis positive because I want the tool coming down in the middle of the part. The part in this case will be the Z0 position for this cutting tool. As I approach the cutting tool, as I bring the cutting tool down towards the workpiece, I need to have some kind of a feeler gauge in which to qualify the tools with. Using a piece of paper as a feeler gauge, I bring my Z-axis position down so that I get just a little bit of resistance between the tool and the top of the part. At that point, now that I'm touching the top of the part, I come back to my control. I press the hand manual mode. The Z-axis button, it asks me to set datum. I'm going to set the datum for the Z-axis to 0 and press enter. At this point in the setup process, the workpiece coordinates for X0, Y0, and Z0 have been established. The next step in the process is to qualify the tool length for the various tools in the program. To do that, we select the Program and Editing button at the extreme right side. When I press this, you will notice that I get a Program and Editing command that tells me the mode of operation that I'm in. I have a program up here that we're using for setup purposes only that begins with begin program to inch mode. That tells me the program ID number is program number 2 and it is an inch program. We will notice as we move the arrow keys down that the contrast is different. These are going to be lighter on the active block that's being dealt with by the computer is going to be this tool block that's going to be the brightest one that you see on the screen. Now that Z0 has been established, it's time to qualify the tools for their tool length. This machine tool is unique in that the tool data is stored in program code. There is not an offset register for storing and handling tool data as there is in any of the other 4 machine tools here in the shop. To access that, I go to the Program and Editing mode, extreme right hand button. As I press that, notice it says Program and Editing on the top, and at the top of the program it says this is program number 2 and it is an inch program. What we would do for setting up a particular program for running is find the correct ID number, and once we have the correct ID number, qualify the tools as required in the setup instructions. If I move down, I notice that the cursor is now on the block for tool definition number 1. The L value in here represents the length of the tool, and the R value, the radius of the tool. What we're going to see is that when we establish the Z-axis Z0 position using the master tool, the length for tool 1 should become 0. If I use the arrow keys and move over to the L position, the next button I want to press is this one. It has a little dot in the center with 4 arrows pointing at the dot. When I press that button, it updates the screen and gives me the length of the cutting tool. Because this is the master tool, it's comparing it to the Z0 position. With that set, I use my arrow keys to exit the block that's under consideration. Going from the program editing mode, we go back to the manual operation mode, pressing the button with the hand on it. Now that I'm in manual operation, I press the stop key, the 6 key, and enter, and it says block is complete with the command being M06 for tool change. I next press cycle start, and the machine will begin the tool change process. I index the tool carousel to the next tool position, and then because this button or light is blinking, I want to be sure that I conclude the tool change before I do anything else. And we're now ready to bring tool number 2 down and qualify it. I select once again the handle mode for activating the handle. I'm going to manually jog down reasonably close, but I'm going to be very careful that I don't slam into the top of the part. And now my Z-axis is active, so we'll come in and touch. Now that I have the same resistance on the paper that I had on the first tool, I come back to my machine control unit. I again activate the manual program or the program editing mode. I arrow down to tool define 2. I arrow over. I have the length word activated, and I press the tool qualification button on the screen. Notice that this updated to the length of the new tool.
You go in there close.
I use my arrow keys to exit out of that block. Go back to the hand mode. Stop the button. 6. Enter. And cycle start.